there is a photo floating around of someone who has blonde hair holding a Grammy who is not me. And it's somebody I've never seen in my life. and it's holding the Grammy. It says Barbara Hannigan with her Grammy. But I wasn't there. Just Google Barbara Hannigan Grammy and you will find a picture of a blonde woman in a long black dress holding a Grammy, and it will say that it's me.
On the Dallas Opera Network, you're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Hey, wherever you are, however you're listening, it's Opera Box Score. I'm your host, George Cederquist, joined on America's talk radio show about opera by Oliver Camacho, Matt Cummings, Weston Williams, and Ashlee Hardgrave. All right, this week, Barbara Hannigan goes inside the huddle to give Weston and Oliver the post-pandemic singer's playbook, to introduce her young artist initiative called Momentum, and to argue why streaming is here to stay. Plus 2-minute drill. Starting lineup is announced for the Cardiff Singer of the World competition. Will Kosovo be this year's front runner? Oliver Camacho, how is that chicken looking?
So for the audience, I'm roasting a chicken right now. I'm looking forward to this taping being over.
We are professionals.
That's why I'm smiling today, because there's going to be some really good hot chicken fat to slather on some lettuces and make the best salad dressing. But let's have this sports talk part so we can talk about Barbara Hannigan in a minute. So.
Matt Cummings, I'm puzzling over all of our names this week.
Barbara Hannigan is presumably not the mistress of a Depression-era orphanage in New York City.
As far as we know.
But she does share the name of a very famous one that everyone should know from the 1977 hit musical Annie.
I'm so glad you explained, George? Because the two people in our audience who would have gotten that reference are
the Venn
like,
diagram of Annie fans and sports fans and opera fans,
who also got the Hannigan reference.
I don't know. God. I feel like we got a lot of Stannies in our audience.
Oh, absolutely.
Ashlee, is it a show that you've ever been associated with, or a show you've ever done?
Oh, absolutely. I did scenes of it when I was a kid, and then I was a Boylan sister in college. So I got to do the knockoff Andrew sisters and sing in the corner and do this. Unlike any other Tuesday, you know.
I mean, I've seen the movie, of course. Man, when I was on the playground as a little kid, boy, was I teased, and I was called Little Orphan Annie the whole time.
But
look at this mustache now, everybody! The Bears get Justin Field in the NFL draft. Ashlee's hopping over there.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. He was absolutely amazing at Ohio State. He's going to work with Andy Dalton, who we randomly are going to pay for a year. But the most important thing is he and his promise are going to help us forget all about the fact that we almost got Russell Wilson, because he's basically a young Russell Wilson in terms of his technique. So he is going to bring in a new era. I'm calling it right now. Very excited.
Even as a Michigan Wolverines fan, I can still applaud a Buckeye that wears Bears orange. The Kentucky Derby, the fastest 2 minutes in sports, was so fast, I completely missed it.
I hope you had a mint julep today in honor of it happening.
I didn't, but I remember saying to my children, like, this is the most exciting 2 minutes in sports, let's watch it together. And they were so bored.
But at least they were only bored for 2 minutes.
I guess so.
If you were to poll them on whether they enjoyed it, they all would have said nay.
All right, let's talk some opera.
Huddle up. Let's go inside the huddle.
So I cannot believe that Barbara Hannigan said yes to us.
Doesn't she know any better?
We do, in fact, love you, Miss Hannigan.
I mean, we've had some pretty important guests on this show, but I have never been more nervous about interviewing somebody than I was.
Both of us. We were like...
And if you watch this interview carefully, you'll see that I'm so nervous that my glasses are fogging up. So I'm constantly taking off my glasses to wipe off the steam. But Barbara Hannigan is amazing. We all know she's amazing. She is so down to earth. She cares so much about her vocation and about her colleagues. and she's doing so much to share what she has with young artists and starting professionals. She has her Young Artist program, Equilibrium, which we will talk about, and her new initiative called Momentum, which we will talk about. And of course, she is the most badass singer-conductor. I mean, has there ever been one before her? I mean, we now have Natalie Stutzman, who's also incredible. Yeah. But I feel like Barbara Hannigan started. Oh, I guess maybe Jose Cura started it, or maybe
someone we're not going to talk about.
Yeah. But not at the same time. Jose Cura and Placid Sunday never sang and conducted at the same time. But to do what Barbara Hannigan does and to sing like Ligeti, Mysteries of the Macabre, or Lulu Sweet, or all this crazy stuff, wearing PVC and wigs and it's
chewing bubble gum.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't know Barbara Hannigan, just go to YouTube and just type in her name and watch any 3 videos that she's made, and you will be amazed. So without further ado, Weston, before I pass it over to the interview, anything you want to say?
Well, I just want to say that we started talking about how she won the Grammy for Crazy Girl Crazy, and why her mother objected to the news's portrayal of it in Canada.
I was sitting in Hamburg in my pajamas with a glass of wine between Lulu shows, just chewing the fat with a friend of mine. And I was watching the Grammys online, because obviously I couldn't go. I had a show, I think, maybe the next day or the day after. Anyway, or rehearsal, I don't know. And I was just sitting there. And I said to my friend, "Oh, just be quiet for a second. They're doing my category. I just have to see." And I never thought that I would win. I just felt that I should see who did win. And then I was like, no, I couldn't believe that RCD won. That was a big shocker.
And did you have to accept the speech online or something?
There was no. Oh, well, the funny thing about it was that there is a photo floating around of someone who has blonde hair holding a Grammy, who is not me, and it's Getty Images has it, and it's somebody I've never seen in my life, and it's holding the Grammy. It says Barbara Hannigan with her Grammy, but I wasn't there. And then my mother, they even put that photograph in the Nova Scotia. I'm from Nova Scotia, right? This province on the east coast of Canada. And they put that photograph in the Nova Scotia newspaper. And my mother called them up. She was like, a lot of people in Nova Scotia know Barbara Hannigan, and they know that photograph is not her. I was like...
We have to get that person on the next podcast.
Oh, maybe that should be our banner image for this episode.
That would be so funny.
Just Google Barbara Hannigan Grammy, and you will find a picture of a blonde woman in a long black dress holding a Grammy, and it will say that it's me.
Well, we are already talking about Crazy Girl Crazy, which has Barrio, Gershwin, and I forget the last
Berg.
And Barry. Okay. Just
the combination.
The three things you always want to put together. And one of those pieces is completely a cappella. Right? The sequenza or something like that. Yeah.
Barrio Sequenza 3. So he wrote all these sequences for solo instruments. And the third one he wrote for solo voice. He wrote it for his ex-wife, who was an amazing American Armenian singer named Kathy Berberian. And it's just a crazy piece with symbols. It's like a graphic score. And so graphic score means that it's not like there are a few notes in it, but there's also all these symbols. It's like hieroglyphics almost that you have to figure out and perform, like tongue clicks and laughing and coughing and gasping. And it's a really crazy piece about a woman who's trying to find her place in the world, really. Huh. And I thought it would fit really well on the CD because the CD is it's kind of about a woman, and it's about a kind of madness, but crazy also can be a positive word if something's crazy, or if I'm crazy about you or something, it has positive connotations. So I was looking at women and craziness and madness and risks and, all that kind of stuff on the CD.
I love it. I often make this little comparison. I have a friend who sight reads music ridiculous. Oh yeah. You might have met her, Catherine Dane.
No, I think I've heard her name.
She's in the Netherlands. Anyway, she's the type of singer.
Oh yeah, Catherine Dane. Sorry, yeah, of course I know Catherine. Yeah, she's amazing.
Where you can throw spaghetti and meatballs on the wall,
I know.
And if it sticks to the wall, she can
She'll
read it
sing
as
it.
music, you know.
She's amazing. Yeah. I recommended her once for something because Reinbert DeLeo, the conductor I often recorded with and performed with many, many times, and I forget where I was, in Munich or I don't know, somewhere. And he called me up and said, I have a concert next week and the singer's gotten sick. Can you recommend anyone? And I recommended Catherine, and she did it, and she was fantastic.
Yeah, she's brilliant.
Yeah.
So when choosing repertoire, I mean, we already learned now the concept behind Crazy Girl Crazy, but
Yeah.
just in general, what are your kind of standards and goals with repertoire choice, especially when you're both conducting and singing?
Well, I think the first thing is to say that pretty well all my choices come from the gut. I mean, instinct, absolutely. It's not intellectual choices at all. It's not that I'm fascinated by analyzing such and such a work and figuring out whether the form is retrograde or retrograde inversion, etc. Totally not interested. I mean, I'm interested in that maybe later, but what's my gut feeling about the piece? And do I want to sink my teeth into it? And do I want to live with it? And do I want to love it? Because it's like a relationship, a piece of music. So is it something I want to spend time with? Is it something I want to have a drink with? You know,
I would have a drink with that sequenza.
Or like, you know, would it go well with my morning cup of tea? You know, and then the next thing is that I like to put repertoire together on programs that make emotional dramaturgical sense to me. That means there has to be a kind of through line that connects everything, and it doesn't need to be a linear story, and it can even be contradictory, but somehow it has to make sense for me, that that everything has to be interconnected. And so I choose very varied repertoire. I love old music. I love new music. I just did the craziest improvisation with live electronics on a Rameau aria. And, I mean,
Which Rameau aria? I'm crazy about Rameau.
Tristes après, you know.
Casta Prolux, yeah.
And so, I mean, I love to mix things up, but there has to be, for me, some kind of interconnectedness with everything, and it has to be really something that I feel I can incorporate in my system.
You have sorry. I was just wanted to ask. You always seem to have such a personal connection to everything that you do, which is so exciting to me as an artist. Just seeing an example of someone doing that and doing it successfully. Do you ever see something what are your limits basically? What is something that you'll see and maybe it's out of your range, or maybe you're like, I'm not sure if I can conduct and sing that at the same time. Like how do you negotiate those limits with this really boundless self-expression that you are so known for?
Well, there are some pieces that lend themselves very well to singing and conducting. And there are other pieces which don't make any sense. Like, I could do it, but it wouldn't make sense. Maybe some of your listeners know this extraordinary piece by Samuel Barber called Knoxville, summer of 1915.
We talk about it all the time, actually.
Yeah. And I ended up singing and conducting it. I was only supposed to sing it, actually, with London Symphony in March, but I ended up singing it and conducting it on one day's notice, which was really, I knew that it would work very well for the piece, because the piece is about conjuring collective memory. So to stand and face the orchestra and sing it, and we didn't have a public, so it was possible to face the orchestra. I mean, that just was like, absolutely 100% that works. But I feel that I suppose I'm in quite a luxury position, but I also have to take credit maybe for having created that luxury position, in saying that I really choose carefully what I do, what repertoire I do, and with whom. And that's like, I'm always, I don't, if I get offered something, I say, who are the other singers? Who's the director? Who's the conductor? If it's an opera, you know, or if if I'm invited to a festival, I want to know who the other people are that's going to be there. I want to know what kind of programming they have, what kind of audiences they have. Like, I'm really selective. And I suppose, maybe that strange path comes from the fact that at the beginning of my career, I was doing like the most obscure contemporary music, like really hardcore, strange stuff. Like, I've even, microtonal, like crazy microtonal improvisational material. And sometimes in the audience, we literally had like 7 people, and
and they were all me.
And I mean, so in a way, like you build up your resilience because you're staying true to what you feel is important. It's not about selling tickets. It's not about, I mean, I was performing a lot of these things, for example, in Holland, where the government was funding concerts. And so they could afford to do a concert where you didn't make any ticket sales. That's not the case in the States, for sure. But I think so. I mean, in a way, that was like a hard knock, because it's not very fun to walk out on stage and see that nobody's there. On the other hand, I was performing music I really believed in. And what happened over time is that audiences started to get larger and started to trust me. And I always say to young artists, this whole business is based on trust and relationship. Trusting the music, trusting the composer, trusting the presenter, trusting your colleagues, having a relationship with those people. It's not about your agent having a relationship with those people. It's about you. And so over the years, building trust and relationship, also with audiences, finding myself finally performing the most contemporary music to full houses at the Munich State Opera or at Paris Opera, whatever, but it's been a long road. I'm going to be 50 in a week and a day. So on May 8th, a week and 2 days.
Happy early birthday.
So, I mean, I'm not sure I'm totally answering your question, but I guess for me, it's been a very interesting path. I didn't have major management, not even remotely major management, until I was 40. So
really? Wow.
Yeah. So I was doing pretty well everything myself. I learned a lot about, again, the trust and relationship. I mean, I was dealing directly with people. The Berlin Philharmonic called me on the phone the first time they wanted me to work with them. Conductors were calling me directly. So that was very cool, because you just talk. You're just talking shop directly instead of agent to agent or management to management. And for me, that's really, the personal interaction is, again, same with the repertoire. There has to be an interconnectedness,
So just go back briefly to the first part of the repertoire, and then it's a great place to pivot. I just want to say that I have some friends, and I'm sure there are a lot of people out there listening right now, who trust your taste in repertoire so much that whenever a new recording comes out, we just talk about like, oh, I've got the new Barbara Hannigan. I'm listening to the new Barbara Hannigan, Not even talking about composers anymore, just talking about you.
But, that I find really wonderful, because I realized at a certain point that because I had the trust of the listener, I could say, hey, why don't you listen to this? Why don't you try listening to this? Why don't we put these things together, and let's all, I'm really curious what people will think when we put, Barrio, Berg, and Gershwin together, or when I put Rameau and this obscure composer named Petrassi and then Hindemith together, which I did like a month ago in X, like really as one unit, one piece with a flow, with no applause in between. And like, people go with it. Audiences are curious, and if you invite them to be curious and to be participating in the event with you, witnessing the event with you, it comes back to that trust. And I also was really lucky that I worked with Winter and Winter label, and now the main part of my albums have been with Alpha. And Alpha. Yeah, me too. They're so amazing, because I just say, oh, why don't we do a Messiaen CD? Great. Why don't we do the Vienna CD, I mean, that's pretty obscure repertoire of early Webern and Zemlinsky's. Yeah. But I mean, they're so into all the things I'm doing. Why don't I put Grisé together with Haydn and No? Like, let's do that triptych. And they're like, thumbs up, you know? And so the support is amazing. But I don't think that would have happened. I remember like trying when I was in my 20s, I remember trying to get stuff that I had done that had already been recorded, you know, in live in concert, and it was a really good quality. I couldn't get it put out on a CD to save my life. So it's been a long game for me, absolutely long game, which is fine. I have no problem with that, but it's interesting, you know.
Well, we touched briefly upon you as a young artist transitioning into your professional self, and now we know your age, which I'm shocked that I heard that.
Thank
But
you. Good answer.
We can bleep it out if you want.
No, it's gonna be. But, I'm advertising it. So.
But I first became aware of you through one of our interview guests, Douglas Williams, who was one of your Equilibrium Young Artist Fellows. And can you talk about the transition between the young artist training to the professional career, and how that space is like a lonely space and a difficult space? Yeah.
Well, you know, around 2016-17, when I started to get into a position where I realized I had some clout, you know, I thought, okay, well, then I need to start paying it forward. And how am I going to do that? And I thought, okay, I could go and, you know, be a regular person at a conservatory and do master classes, which I do to a certain extent. I mean, I go to Juilliard regularly and University of Toronto and some other places. But I thought, that's not really where I'm needed. Where am I needed? And I thought the loneliest time, the most isolated time of a young artist's career is when or of any artist's career, I think, is when they're starting out. And all of a sudden you're a professional. You know, you've done all your YAPs, your young artist programs, and all of a sudden you're out there on the road and you're supposed to know everything, and you know nothing, and you don't know anyone. You have a few people. And that period of, you know, I mean, I think it's about 7 years when every cent you make is basically going back into coaching, training, and prepping, because everything you do is new. You're on the road alone. You're taking every possible gig you can. And so I decided to create this initiative, which was really for young professionals. It was for young professional artists in the first substantial phase of their career. I didn't want to put an age limit on it. I said, what does the first substantial phase mean? About the first 7 years of your career. Because I figured, like, what I've seen in my life is that if an artist makes it through those first 7 years, usually they'll stick around. But if the first 7 years are too tough, then we lose a lot of artists into something
I was
else.
just telling Weston that I know people who completed some of the most prestigious, you know, finishing programs, and then they just disappear.
And then they just disappeared, And so I just thought that's maybe where I can be a helping hand, because I know a lot of people. I do all my own programming. I don't like... Orchestras don't call me up and say, would you like to come and conduct this? No, they just say, would you like to come? And I say, yes, and this is what I would like to do. So I'm in a position where I can program, and because I have the trust of orchestras and companies and managements and so on, I can say, and I'd like to invite this and this and this person who you've never heard of. And they'll say, okay. So that's what I decided to do, was to start Equilibrium. And I wanted to find who was out there, who was interesting, who was curious, who was kind of, people that had something different about them. Not just like a special skill, but like that had a high capacity for discipline and hard work, that were curious, had to have good voices, high level of musicianship, good technique, you know, the possibility really to have a serious career. But we're still, maybe could use a helping hand. And so I started EQ. And I had, by now, I started with a production of The Rake's Progress, which I was triple casting, and I was going to do it with four different orchestras, maybe, which I did. And we also made a film of it, and a documentary was made. So that was like the first project. And I didn't have any funding, by the way. So so that was kind of crazy. So then And I was like, well, of course I'll sink some of my own savings into it, but I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it. But then I applied to one foundation, the Luzern Art Mentor Foundation, and they gave us some money just when I really needed it, which was amazing. And then I won a prize in Sweden, the Rolf Schock Prize. And it's a prize from he was a mathematician, kind of physicist expert, and he had a prize that went out to 4 people. One was in the arts and the other 3 were in math and sciences. And I got that prize, and it gave me enough money to get the thing going in the first year. And so that was amazing. So I had auditions. I heard hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications, I think from like 42 countries. I watched everything online. I read their letters. I looked at their CVs. I watched their videos. And then I invited musicians to come, the singers, in person to different cities and to do auditions. And that's how I met Doug Williams, for example. I'd heard about him, so I already was pretty interested in him.
So am I.
Oh, he's such a phenomenal artist. I mean,
I love him. I know he knows that I love him, but like I really love him. So
yeah, super talent, and I mean, with the voice that he has, which is such a rich bass baritone instrument, and combined with his curiosity, his high level of musicianship, and his ability and interest in the contemporary repertoire as well as the traditional repertoire.
And poetry and dancing.
And poetry and dancing. It's just, yeah. And just, he's a real humanist, you know. So, so that's, I mean, it's kind of like people like Doug that I ended up choosing for Equilibrium. And we're now, what is it now? 2021. So, and we actually had a season this year. It was crazy. Like in the pandemic.
Wow.
Yeah. Like Pulcinella became our pandemic piece. And we did it I had a team in Switzerland. I have a team, including Doug, coming up at the Paris Philharmonie. I was with Munich Philharmonic, also with Doug. I created opportunities I did an Equilibrium engagement, like the show that's going to be broadcast tomorrow night, April 30th. Also, a young artist who auditioned for Equilibrium. So I've been keeping the dream alive. And it's really, it's an initiative where I bring the younger artists into the highest level of performance with the orchestras and ensembles with whom I work. But I'm also, we also have guests come in and talk to us. And I love this. Like, I love Q&As. I always learn so much. Kind of like podcasts, you know, I just love podcasts. And so we have people like Daniel Harding, Nathalie Dessay, Laurent Naouri, Didier Martin, the head of Alpha. We've had social media experts coming in. We've had, you know, mental health experts coming in. We've had all kinds of people that come in and speak to the young artists about their paths. Composers, Casper Holton, the former
Any athletes come in?
Well, Jackie Reardon, she's kind of part of EQ, and Jackie's a former professional tennis player who started this whole mindset, Friendly Eyes kind of initiative, which is all about, mental focus and discipline, basically. And so there have been athletes who are connected to EQ people because of our connection to Olympic athletes through Jackie. If you ask me the same question in about a month, I'll have a different answer for you.
You have Roger Federer coming in?
Oh, that would be cool. No, I don't have a plan for Roger Federer. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I'm a huge fan. That guy is classy. Really classy.
Right now, I've got my eyes on Stefanos Tsitsipas.
Oh,
first, because I love his name, but also, I mean,
it sounds like
come on.
Sounds like the tsitsi fly. Yeah.
So obviously you're providing a lot of resources, even as you said, during the pandemic. And I feel like at this point, it almost feels like a cliche to talk about what the world of the arts is going to look like after the pandemic. But I thought you might have because you're already such an original sort of figure in the operatic pantheon, if you will. And I was just wondering, how do you think artists can and should move forward to create a new post-pandemic normal, especially when it comes to like like momentum or just your general thoughts in abstract.
Okay, well, maybe I'll leave momentum for maybe my second part of my answer, and I'll start with a few things. I think that we have to accept that streaming is here to stay. And if you like it or you don't like it, you've got to accept it. That some concert halls had streaming, like Berlin Phil and Gothenburg Symphony. It was normal for the concerts to be streamed. Other places like the radio orchestras, they're always going out on the radio and occasionally had video coverage. But I think we have to accept now that it's here. And it's difficult for any artists. I mean, I've talked to many artists that are, not young artists anymore about how tough they find the streamings because the audience isn't there and that they really get their energy from the audience. I also... What I find the most difficult is singing when there is an audience and it's also being streamed. So say you've got a half a size audience, or some places I played 1,800 seat hall in November for 50 people, and we did the show 6 times and it was for radio. And that was super tough because I wanted to sing for the radio mic, but there's 50 people spread out over this huge hall, and if they don't hear me, I also feel so. And you sing very differently, you perform very differently. It's like film acting versus theater acting. So, and it's the same with streaming. Like, I actually started to really enjoy the streamings as long as there was no audience there. If I could do a streaming, like a recording session with beautiful light, and I just thought this is a really beautiful recording session and we're all dressed up and we look fabulous and I'm singing for the mic, then it was okay. But I think this is something that artists are really going to have to navigate, because it's not only the fact that it's being streamed, it's the fact that it's staying out there.
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
not just your one night concert where you didn't feel at your best. You can't forget about it because everybody keeps watching it for the next, 30 days, 6 months, 5 years. And it's very hard to negotiate rights to say it can't stay up or I get approval. I mean, artist approval. I mean, even me at the age I'm at, artist approval is really hard to sort out. And I can't imagine what it's like for young artists that don't have, the power that the older artists have.
I just think of like the Met, every night since the beginning of the pandemic, just putting out another stream in their library. And I can't imagine like what the legal loopholes must be that they're exploiting to do that. But it is very much a concern. And especially when for someone like you who is creating something so personal, have you ever run into anything like that where you've not wanted them to put something out?
Well, actually, no, I've been pretty supportive of everything going out. I just also, maybe because I'm from Waverly, Nova Scotia, and much of my family and friends, they still live in Nova Scotia. They're not going to get to Paris Opera. They're not going to get to Munich. So I like that my family can, if the internet's working that day, that they can watch the stuff I'm doing. So
as an Alabama native, I really feel that.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think it's really amazing. And I'm such a fan of radio. And I've been, pretty well, I would say a lot of what I did since I was 19 years old was on radio because I was doing world premieres. So I'm used to being like out there. And I feel that the idea of traveling is going to change. And this hopping overseas back and forth and I think that's probably going to change in the next while. I have friends in the airline industry. I also have friends in the climate change movement. And I know that both are suffering for very different reasons. But I think that we're going to see touring change considerably. And I personally am much less eager. I never liked being on airplanes very much anyway, because sometimes I could maybe watch a movie that was nice or catch up on some reading, but otherwise I just find I find it very, very stressful going through customs and going overseas back and forth and the jet lag and so on. So, but I think it's really going to change. I think financially there's going to be less money, and people are going to be more interested in having artists come for 2 or 3 weeks than coming for 1 week at a time. And I'm noticing that already in my calendar in future seasons, that people want you to come for a residency. And I do too, as long as I can find someone to look after my cats. Like I'm happy to
volunteering
go somewhere.
as tribute.
Oh, really?
Well, we'll take care of your cats for you while you're away.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that's pretty important. And then if I go back to momentum, I'll just say a few words about it. So I was having all these conversations with my colleagues from Equilibrium, my younger colleagues, during the first few months of the pandemic. And then when there was like a window in the spring and summer where these online concerts were happening, and sometimes even concerts for audiences. And the younger artists were saying, yeah, but nobody's asking us. They're asking like the stars, but they're not asking us to headline an event when the places want to bring their audiences back. And they said, our momentum just got going and now it's been stopped. And I was like, okay. So I looked at all the series and I looked at everyone that was being asked to come and perform, conductors and soloists. I started with singers and conductors. And I just got on the phone and I called them and I said, okay, so there's very little work. I need you to share the stage with a younger artist of your choice. You will share your fee with them. The presenter will give them some money, and Momentum will give some money to the event. So it'll be a 3-way contribution to a fee for a young artist. Say you've got a 75-minute recital, you give them 10 to 15 minutes on the main stage in your event. It's exciting for the audience because they're like, oh, who does Natalie Dessay want to share the stage with? This is interesting. Who did she choose? Or, who did, like, Patricia Kapachinskaya, the violinist, who did she choose or whatever. So it's interesting for the audience. I think mentoring is something that is identifiable, is understandable by people in many, many different fields. So it shows a really fine example for business, for law, for medicine, for technology, etc. We're kind of leading the way. And it shows generosity. And so the momentum model, basically what happened was I guess I must have spent about 100 hours on the telephone over the period of maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and calling everyone I knew and many people that I didn't know, asking them to pledge to do an event. I said, even if you only do it once on your entire year, then you're part of it. Okay? And I would explain it. They'd be like, okay. And I said, okay, I'm going to put up your picture and I want a quote from you. So I did. I had hired someone to create the fabulous website. And one of the people I was talking to, I was going to launch everything in September. And then I was talking to Sir Antonio Pappano, who is the chief conductor of the Royal Opera House in London. And I was talking to him, and he was listening, and he said he wanted to be part of it. And he said, I think I have an idea. Let me come back to you. And literally a day later, it was August 27th or something, he said, I'm going to do it on Friday this week. I was like, no, we're not ready. We're not launching until mid-September. And this was going to be August 30th. And I didn't say no. I just said, great. Okay. And then it was no sleep for 3 days to just get everything with the website and everything. We just raced to the finish and we got everything up, and Tony launched it. Tony Pappano launched it with the London Philharmonic Orchestra, and he played the piano for a young baritone. And so it's amazing. And I think it's really here to stay. The momentum model, where older artists, leading artists, are inviting younger artists to share the main stage with them, basically giving them a seat at the table. I mean, why would you not do that? Mm-hmm. Why now that we've done it, and this is the feedback that I'm getting, everybody that's done it, why would you not do that? Audiences love it, concert series love it. We meet lots of new young artists. We get to see who the leading artists are interested in and why. It evokes curiosity. It's just, yeah. So I was actually talking to Leeds Leader, which is a concert series in England today. And he was telling me that they'd implemented the Momentum model. And now one of the young Momentum artists that they hired now is getting a main stage recital of his own on the series. And I was like, yes. And we had another Momentum artist, Fleur Barron, who's also part of Equilibrium. And Fleur was hired as a Momentum artist. And then when she had a big solo recital later in the year, she brought on a younger artist onto her recital. So she flipped it like within 6 months. She was like the leading artist. And I was just like, yeah, that's how it's done. So yeah, like, you know, and when you're passionate about stuff and enthusiastic about stuff, you have time to make it happen. You can sleep less.
I think we're going to start dedicating 10 minutes of our podcast to introduce people to other podcasts.
Why not?
A little more sports before we dive into everything you need to know from Operaland this week. Ashlee, what was going on at the Old Trafford in Manchester?
In the words of a great Twisted Sister song, we're not gonna take it anymore. They went ham and stormed the field to protest the owners, who are the Glazer family. They're frustrated with those guys because they are saddling the football club with a lot of debt. The Super League debacle was apparently the last straw for a lot of folks, but they stormed the field so much so that they've canceled, I think it was yesterday's match that they had to cancel, but the fans at Manchester are upset. And it's very interesting. I learned this today. They're talking about, the fans are upset because Manchester has a lot of debt as a football club. The Glazer family owns another football club.
That's right.
Across the pond.
Tampa Bay, right?
Who are the reigning Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yeah. So, it'll be very interesting to see how much money Tampa Bay makes and if any of the assets get moved around. My biggest question though was I wonder if this would work in the opera world. Like if we could get a bunch of fans to like rabidly protest Gelb at like a Traviata. Like,
I mean, first you'd have to get a bunch of Met fans to be mad at Peter Gelb.
Very fair. Can we fly in folks from like other, because I bet we could get some rowdy Texas fans and some Minnesota fans. I bet maybe we could make this work.
We could put together. We could get some hooligans.
Could work. No, I really, honestly do. I mean, I think you could really have a crazy, eye-catching impact. But boy, it would take some organization. It's not just like 6 pints down the pub and then let off some fireworks outside the Old Trafford. It takes a little more connection to make that happen. 2-minute drill. It's right now.
This just in. The 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
The BBC Cardiff Singer of the World competition will return this summer to pit singers from 15 countries against each other for the main prize and the song prize. We'll be rooting for American baritone Reginald Smith Jr., though so far no contestant has the official OBS bump. The competition begins June 13th without an audience.
As American theaters and opera companies gear up for potential reopenings in the fall, at least one major opera house may not open in 2021. The International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, the union that represents stagehands, technicians, has announced the lockout of its workers at the Metropolitan Opera is unlikely to end before 2022.
Carphone tycoon David Ross will step down as chair of the Royal Opera House just months into his 4-year tenure. Sky News reports that the billionaire's departure has been triggered by his prospective appointment as a second-term chair for the National Portrait Gallery.
This week's yellow cards.
Austria. The Vienna State Opera has set its reopening date to May 14th in order to complete its last 6 weeks of its current season.
This week's red cards.
Germany. Opera companies continue to batten down the hatches in the wake of COVID-19 cases in the country. Oper Frankfurt, Staatsoper Stuttgart, Staatsoper Dresden, Bayerische Staatsoper, and Nationaltheater Mannheim have all extended their shutdowns. Plus, Oper Köln and Mecklenburgisches Staatstheater have announced they will be ending their seasons altogether.
Italy. Maggio Musicale Fiorentino has canceled its upcoming performance of Don Giovanni due to the pandemic.
Poland. The Polish National Opera has extended its closure to May 7th, canceling that day's performance of Werther.
Russia! the Bolshoi has canceled all touring productions abroad until March 2022, citing international distrust of Russian-made vaccines.
On the disabled list, Anita Rachvelishvili has canceled her upcoming recital at the Teatro Real de Madrid due to family reasons. The mezzo-soprano reassured her social media followers that she was fine and that the concert would be rescheduled soon.
Exit stage right, Paul Kellogg, the former general and artistic director of both Glimmerglass and New York City Operas, has died at 84. During his Glimmerglass tenure, he doubled the productions per season, built a new theater, and earned the company a national reputation.
English composer and musicologist Anthony Payne has passed away, 1 month after the passing of his wife, soprano Jane Manning. He is best known for his completion of Edward Elgar's Third Symphony for the BBC Proms, as well as his books on Arnold Schoenberg and Frank Bridge.
Greek-American Verdi baritone Theodori Lambrinos has died at age 85. Lambrinos sang 60-plus roles with the Metropolitan Opera. He was an avid promoter of classical Greek music and released an album of Hellenic songs.
Romanian tenor Corneliu Murgu has passed away at age 72. After an international career in Verdi tenor roles, he became the general manager of Romania's National Opera.
American soprano and voice teacher Eileen Schauler-Sharon has passed away at age 92. She made her New York City Opera debut in the title role of Shostakovich's Lady Macbeth of the Mid-Sense District and sang 24 lead roles with the company. Sharon made her Broadway debut in the title role of My Darlin' Aida.
And on this day, May 3rd, in 1844, it was the birth of English impresario, founder of the Savoy Theatre, and George's secret father, Richard D'Oyly-Carte. A very happy birthday to Russian composer Nikolai Cherepinin, nailed it, who was born on this day in 1873 in St. Petersburg. In 1918, it was the birth of Canadian tenor Leopold Simoneau in Saint-Flavien, Canada. Dutch mezzo-soprano Mimi Arden was born on this day in 1924, and in 1971, a very happy birthday to the NPR radio network, which is the United States national non-commercial radio network and #1 competition for this podcast.
And that's your 2-minute drill. Oh my goodness. When will the madness stop at the Met? It's just like chaos to chaos to chaos over there.
I mean, not till 2022, apparently, according to the people that are literally going to have to be in the house to make the shows work. Okay. Here's the thing. I'm speechless. That's where I am. I'm fully speechless. No, I feel like no one's thinking this through. Like, how in the world do you expect to have productions when you are locking out all of the literal sets of skilled hands that you need to make the actual operatic magic happen? Those sets ain't gonna move themselves, Peter. You gonna get back there and do it? Come on.
Those lights don't get turned on by themselves.
It's like, it's a never-ending battle between like short-term and long-term interests with union negotiations, and it's really hard to get that balance right on both sides, but right now, like, scorched earth is here to stay. Yeah. And this one is going to be messy until they have an agreement.
Right, look, IATSE knows that there are problems coming down the pike here, right? Like, this is a very unsettled, uncertain world. It's not going to get any easier. It feels like they're trying to get ahead of the Met here and try and, make the first move. Oliver.
No, it's an old reference, but it just reminds me of Daenerys Targaryen going ahead and burning down what was the name of the city? King's Landing. Yeah. It's like, let's just burn it. Whatever.
The final season of the Met is not looking very good. It's not very well written.
Are they doing Get to Demerun?
I do respect Yahtzee for like really being like, if you're not gonna work things out, it's not gonna happen. And because they know that looks bad, especially for the Met. And there's only so many ways the Met can spin it for that long and still remain the good guy. At least that's what they're betting, I imagine.
Well, I mean, we've talked about this story on the show before in that the last kind of movement here was that the Met was agreeing to bridge payments in order to get the unions to the table for these negotiations. And now the unions are saying that they really are not interested in fair negotiations and that nothing has really moved since then. Yeah. It's a bad sign.
Well, and at the end of the day, like, if the Met wants to come back in the way that the Met wants to come back, and in the way that their like truest diehard patrons want to come back. That is America's version of grand opera, and grand opera needs all of the grandioseness. It needs the big sets. It needs the big costumes, and for that, you need the skilled labor of these technicians that are all represented by this union. So they know exactly what they're doing, and they know they hold the power here.
From the stage of the Met to the boardroom at Covent Garden in the Royal Opera House. So David Ross, the founder of the Carphone Warehouse.
What a thing to make your fortune on. I love it.
I mean, that's like being the fax kingpin, you know? Like,
he invented toaster strudel.
And Pop-Tarts. So this is when he took the job 9 months ago. David Ross said he was, quote, passionate about creating opportunities for all and ensuring that everyone can enjoy our great cultural institutions, artists, and musicians. So that was A, during the pandemic, and B, like, not exactly a lie, but sort of, management speak, essentially. Of course, David Ross, the member of the ROH board who bought that David Hockney painting from...
Suck up.
The God. In order to kind of keep the whole thing afloat. My problem, of course, is that he's part of the Conservative Party, and he's a big Conservative Party donor. Does the Royal Opera House really need a big Tory running that ship?
It does
Let's
not.
make this political. I don't think it does. Where's
Get the Sharpie. Get the Sharpie.
Apparently David Ross agrees with you because he's not there anymore.
And he shouldn't be confused with Bob Ross, by the way. I've also been confused with Bob Ross along with Little Earth and Annie. And they're two different people.
Thank you, George.
Thank you for that update from the front lines.
All right, let's wrap this show up.
Good call. Bad call on Opera Box Score.
Good call, bad call, the way we always wrap up every show of
Except
the
Weston.
OBS. Starting off with Oliver Camacho.
This week, Teatro Under Wien released a teaser video of their production of Platée. The entire opera performance will come out later this summer, but Janine de Beek stars as La Folie and dances the Vogue. And if you have not seen this video yet, get you to the internet and look it up.
It's so good.
It's incredible.
Matt Cummings.
I got a bad call this week, which is about a New York Times story that came out in between when we recorded the last week's show and when it came out. We haven't really talked very much about the downfall of Scott Rudin and all of the stories that have come out about his apparently legendarily abusive behavior and all of the harrowing allegations that former staffers and coworkers are bringing forward now. And seems like it's a long overdue reckoning there. But one of the upshots that came from it that is really unfortunate for all of us theater lovers is that the long-awaited Buñuel musical from Stephen Sondheim is almost certainly not going to be happening. It's been in development hell for quite some time. Sondheim is 91 years old and doesn't look like that's going to come together. So
we're sorry for your loss, Matt.
I'm just going to have to pretend that Bounce didn't happen so that the last Sondheim musical is good.
Well, but keep in mind, there are rumblings that there's going to be a re-recording of a full cast recording of Anyone Can Whistle. So we've got something to look forward to.
Well, and of course, Thomas Addas, when he did Exterminating Angel, he kind of filled that Buñuel niche, I think, in a way. Weston Williams, anything good or bad on your mind? I didn't think so. Ashlee Hardgrave.
I am a big fan of gospel music. This shouldn't surprise anyone. It is Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and I want to bring to your attention this really awesome group that I love. I've known them for a while, but I've really been getting into them this last week or so. They're called Korean Soul, and it is exactly what you think it is. It is a soul gospel 4-guy Korean group, and they are incredible. Amazing. They have a ton of stuff on YouTube. They've been taken under the wings of BB and CC Winans. If you know anything about gospel music, that is a big deal. And it just got announced that they're going to be on this season of America's Got Talent. And so in a move that shocks even me, I'm going to be watching America's Got Talent so that I can watch Korean Soul. So look them up. Get into it.
I got a good call as well this week. Uncle George, always a little bit late to the party, but I did finally watch Bohemian Rhapsody, the biopic, and it does a great job of showing you the influence of opera on Freddie Mercury. You've got some great Puccini referenced in that film. So
is there any shout out
takes?
Is there any shout out to OBS Hall of Famer Montserrat Caballé?
That's it for this week's edition of America's Talk radio show about opera. Our announcer is Norm Woodel. He's at normwoodel.com. On Facebook, search for Opera Box Score. Twitter, Instagram, we're at Opera Box Score, and just helping us deepen that bench of listeners by liking and sharing our social media posts. Email us your hot takes, operaboxscore@gmail.com. Subscribe to the podcast that's on Stitcher, or just favorite the show on Apple Podcasts. The views and opinions expressed on Opera Box Score are solely those of the show's creative team. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of the accounts of this show without the express written consent of Opera Box Score is fine if traded for a first-round draft pick.
Go Bears.
Our creative consultant is Oliver Camacho, our audio and video editor, Weston Williams. For your co-hosts, Matt Cummings and Ashlee Hardgrave, as well as our special guest, Barbara Hannigan, I'm George Cederquist, asking you to continue the conversation about opera with your pit crew as they change your tires. We're back with an all-new show next week when we spotlight Asian artists you should know. Plus, more opera headlines, more hot takes, more momentum. Join us.